Well, I think that's a really interesting situation around the Iranian nuclear deal because potentially Iran could change its policy. It could normalise its relations with the international community. It no longer faces an imminent preemptive attack to destroy its nuclear facilities, not at least for 15 years. So it doesn't need all the asymmetric deterrent capabilities that it's built up over the years, whether that's its ballistic missile forces, arguably a poor man's air force, and support for groups like Hezbollah, who can create trouble for its opponents. Um, it could instead build up its conventional military capabilities to match states like Saudi Arabia and things like that. And there are already indications that maybe they're going to invest heavily in their air force. But at the same time, there are also a lot of signs that Iran has no intention of really shifting its geostrategic posture, and it still feels very threatened in the region, despite this deal happening. And the IRGC has unveiled an awful lot of new missiles in the last year, whether that's the Sumar cruise missile, the Fatah 313 extended range tactical ballistic missile, and the new steerable EMAD RV for its medium range ballistic missiles. So the signals that we're getting from them is it's going to be pretty much business as usual. At the same time, they're obviously supporting paramilitaries in Iraq and Syria and allegedly in Yemen as well. So it seems to be business as usual for the Iranians, and arguably that is going to be because the IRGC is not really going to want to see its influence and its share of the defence budget eroded over the coming years. So at this stage, it looks like what the nuclear deal will do is give Iran a lot more resources that it can channel into its existing policies, which will be very threatening for the Sunni Arab states, especially Saudi Arabia. So we'll probably see an escalation in the region's Sunni Shia power struggle that has been escalating over the last few years. The US strategy for countering the Islamic State made pretty slow progress in 2015, and I don't think anyone will deny that. If there was any hope of Mosul being recaptured in 2015, that evaporated in May when al-Ramadi was captured in the face of a wave of suicide bombings. One of the key problems really for them is getting the effective ground forces that they can support, whether that's in Iraq or Syria. Problem in Iraq is that the army is demoralised and it's struggling to rebuild itself with US support. At the same time, the Iranian-backed Shia paramilitaries are there, and they're not necessarily the forces that you can really put into Sunni Arab areas. Likewise, the Kurdish forces, that they are considered quite threatening by the Arab communities. At the same time, in Syria, obviously, the US doesn't support the Syrian military, and that leaves you with picking groups from the opposition to work with. Initially, the US went for a strategy of trying to create new groups to fight the Islamic State, proved to be an absolute failure. Now that's shifted over to supporting groups that are already out there, which seems eminently more sensible. And as part of that, they're gonna put some special forces guys on the ground to support them. So I think we can see more pressure building over the next year. So the Ramadi will probably be surrounded and hopefully recaptured, and then people can start thinking about Mosul. They've already cut the supply lines running through Sinjar. But Syria, really, it's difficult to see how there can be such a big change of momentum that they're going to be serious inroads towards retaking Raqqa and other Islamic State-controlled areas. I think it's important to remember that the Russians came into Syria with a very different game plan from the US and its allies. Their main objective is to prop up the Assad regime, and their strategy certainly appears to be one of surging as much force into the country as logistics allow, and trying to turn around the situation on the front lines as quickly as possible, while their diplomats tout some sort of transition plan which could conceivably see Assad step down and some sort of transitional government being set up pending a new constitution. However, they've only had sort of marginal success with that at this stage. And in the wake of the Metrojet airliner bombing in Sinai and the Paris attacks, then maybe what we've seen is a shift more towards targeting the Islamic State as opposed to other groups that are more immediate threat to the regime. Now, what we've just seen is 4 days of long-range cruise missile strikes. Much of that did seemingly attack the Islamic State as opposed to the other groups. Meanwhile, the actual air group in Syria was still undertaking the core task on the main front lines. But I think this was Russia trying to show solidarity with the anti-IS campaign and saying, hey, we can all be on the same side and we can maybe deliver a peace in Syria that is going to be mutually beneficial to everyone. And I think that is the case, that the Russians are in a position to tell Assad to retire and give him a soft exit, potentially bringing the Western powers in to help pressurize the opposition to get on board, and everyone can then maybe look at the ganging up on the Islamic State. However, I think there are also a lot of countries that are going to want to see the Russians bleed in Syria before that really makes any progress. And I think we've maybe kind of seen that with the Turks shooting down the Russian Su-24, and that's going to create tensions and problems with pushing through any kind of peace where the Turks really need to be on board.